So this is part three of this series, and I now have a title for the series, and it's "What Meher Baba Really Taught and Why It Matters." And I'm Christopher Ott, and I will be continuing on. Um, so what I was saying at the end of part two is I was addressing the question, well, what if there are problems in how Meher Baba, in understanding what Meher Baba taught, how do I know this, and what qualifies me to say and to correct it? Well, I was getting into that. What makes me especially in a uniquely given what gives me a unique perspective on this? It's not, as I said, because I'm smart. It's because of the order of things, the order in which things happened, and certain coincidences that enabled me to recognize something that was not automatically obvious about his teaching. Now, let me give a thought on this that I had this morning, which is that Meher Baba says that he's the avatar, which and our discussion isn't about arguing whether he is or he isn't, because I can't make that case, and it's up to anybody to decide. But that's not our point. Our point is to look at his teaching and see if there's something in it that could have merit for philosophy and for mankind, some improvement. And whether he's the avatar or not, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because that's not what we're trying to do. And I don't even make a case for, at least not philosophically, I don't make a case from authority, from Meher Baba's authority, like say, well, it's revelation from God, and therefore it's true. That would be a circular reasoning. Instead, I look at what he says, and what I've discovered in what he taught is something much more revolutionary than others have noticed, because they weren't really in a position to. And I want to talk about why others are not in a position to, before I go on and say why I could. First of all, Meher Baba's idea of the avatar is that every 700 years this figure comes that gives a new revelation. And this revelation moves man forward in his understanding of God and the path and so forth. And so it represents a development for man. But those developments take a while to digest. They're very big. Like Meher Baba said, I've come to bring about a revolution in man's thinking, the slowest of all revolutions. So this is something that could take the whole of 700, 1400 years to totally digest and to incorporate into our lives, into how we look at everything else. It's not something that's easy and on the surface and obvious. If it were, it wouldn't be much of anything. So this is the fact that it's revolutionary. This is not a violent revolution with guns. This is a revolution in how people think, and that takes a long time. And so the fact that the first generation of followers of Baba, or even a couple generations, Baba's been gone about 54 years, they and he was teaching. He had disciples from the 20s. So we've about 100 years has gone by, and those first couple generations may have missed some things. So let's that were there. So to give an example, after Jesus' crucifixion and death, there's a long period where the church fathers developed the concepts of Christianity. It wasn't right away, and it doesn't matter if you agree with them or not, this is a fact. And those were philosophers, and they developed Christianity, and the one most famous is, of course, Augustine of Hippo, who is considered one of the great philosophers of all time, and he really sort of charted out what was today Christian doctrine from analyzing the scriptures and so forth, and using his great intellect on what was, until then, some of it was still kind of vague. So And now he lived in the 4th century after Jesus, so that takes a while. You see, this isn't some thing that's just unique. So it's not a pejorative statement to say that his followers didn't understand him or fully misunderstood him. That would be expected if all this were true. So I wanted to say that. Okay, so the other thing that causes misunderstanding of Meher Baba is that people tend to come to his teaching already with a body of knowledge in their head, a body of ideas that they've acquired over their lifetime. Um, the, um, this is especially true of the generation that came along in the 1960s. They had read all kinds of other things, Edgar Cayce and Theosophy and things like that. And so when they came to Baba, they thought, well, that's what he's saying. He's saying things like that, but he's actually not. So if Baba, for instance, is talking about the creation of the world, and he talks about God, you just automatically assume it must be like Genesis, that he's saying God created the world. But Baba said that God didn't create the world. So I'll be getting into that. But it would not be immediately obvious that he's saying that. He clarifies that elsewhere. That'll be in my book, exactly where he says that. But you see how easy, you see the word God. Now also when he says God, we all have assumptions about what we mean by God. And he may not be, and he's not. He's not using that, the word God, the concept of God, in the same way. But he chooses to use the same word because he's making a development. He's not throwing out the old. It's like a lot of our understanding of God, he would say is right, but a lot of it's wrong. And so we can't assume because he's using words that are familiar to us that he's talking about those same familiar concepts. All right? So we can tend to, when we see something new, we can tend to read our old ideas into it. That's what I'm trying to say. But I didn't have any old ideas when I first heard this. And that's what I've been trying to get at. And so at the end of part 2, I was saying how my parents heard of Baba when I was 4. And then in the spring of 1964, my father was telling me about Baba. And it's a big story that he tells, and it's recorded on online. It's on YouTube. Him telling the story of telling me about Baba, and he got up on a picnic table and he was saying how the Avatar is the highest of the high, and I was impressed with my dad, and my dad had this fun relationship where I was his little protege, and anyway, later that day I rode my tricycle up to the window. And I was thinking about the things he had told me, and I said, all there is to think about is Baba. So now I was like this at 4 years old. My sisters, he didn't have that relationship with and didn't tell them about Baba, and none of them follow him today. And I'm going to get into why I think that is. There's a certain way my father told me about Baba. This is why I still believe in him. And I used the same method when I told my daughter, and this is in a film a video I did called "Teach Your Children Well," which is online, and I tell the story that he told me and where it came from, and people don't know how important that is. They don't understand that if you don't teach them like this, they will. Then they will later hear stuff like that other people think, like Darwinism or Genesis or alien. What do they call that? Transpermia. And then by then you've lost them. They're never gonna. And what are they going to do? They'll have no way to ever understand Baba. Because they're going to be reading all those things into what he said, or be some conflict with this or that. But I didn't have any conflict. So I heard Baba explained correctly from the very beginning by my father, and then he always was a mentor to me. Now, how come he was able to follow? Well, he didn't. A lot of things that he didn't understand, but I later did, and I didn't. I did after he had died. So I couldn't share those things with him. But he did a really good job, and also he did not come from a religious family with doctrines and dogmas. He came from his father was a communist, and they were totally agnostic, and he never even thought about the subject. All he said before he read about Baba, about God, is that God was some kind of like infinite consciousness which you couldn't get your mind around, and who cares? And his art, he said, but his religion was painting. He was an artist. So so he had that fresh mind, and then I had a totally fresh mind. So this is the way it's different. If you go to somebody else, they've already been reading other things by the time they heard Baba, and that pretty much made a block between them and what Baba was saying. But also, I studied philosophy. Now, people who study philosophy from a young age, they already get a lot of dogmas themselves. Um, they think that they've got clever points of skepticism, say, about God, but they don't realize that they have very narrow concepts about God because that wasn't even the area they studied. So generally, philosophy doesn't really prepare you to be able to understand Baba. But I didn't study any philosophy until I was 40 years old. So it was a very different experience, and I was even older than some of my teachers. So I was very interested in the questions of philosophy, and it took them very seriously and I respected my professors a lot, but I wasn't overwhelmed. I never, I didn't have to like sign up for some philosophical school in order to get, complete my degree. Plus, that is the reason that I don't have my PhD, because I wouldn't. I'm not a materialist or an idealist. I have this other thing I'm going to get to. So I'm not sure how clear all this has been. Um, okay, that's that. So, um, and then you have to add that I grew up on the Meher Spiritual Center when I was 6 years old. My parents met Baba in '64 and '65, but they left us with the Rileys, us kids, and then when after that they moved us to the Meher Spiritual Center, which is across the street from me now, and you can look it up. It's in South Carolina in the United States, and I lived there on the center, and I listened to, you know, our guests that were there every day. We had dozens of people passing through the center in those days as I grew up from about 7 years old to about 20. And I would, and there were always new people, so I heard a lot of ideas. So when I say what Meher Baba people think, I absolutely do know what they think. It sounds like I'm being arrogant. No, I've literally met, not really met because they didn't really pay attention to me. They were talking to my parents who were interesting and erudite, and I was just a fly on the wall. But I sort of saw and heard the thoughts of thousands of people from 1967 to 1980. So that also is unique. I don't think anybody else had that. Nobody else grew up on the center. There was Charles and John Haynes. Their mother lived on the center, but they were already um, out of high school by the time their mother lived on the center. So they didn't grow up there. And so I've had a lot of unique intellectual coincidences that have allowed me to sort of see this thing from a whole other point of view. So when I was studying philosophy, and I had understood Baba basically from my growing up, things were coming to mind partly from things he had said But that's a very unique thing. I mean, I'm hearing the problems of philosophy, and then I've got this background of what Mayor Baba said. Now, who would be able to put that together? If you go to a PhD, he is a reductive materialist, or he is a Kantian. He's going to belong to his school, and he's going to, all his entire attention is to dismiss that as nonsense, kookiness, new age nonsense. The sad thing is that if he hears it from the Baba people, what they think that he Baba taught, it will be new age nonsense, a lot of it. And I'm going to get into all that. So I'm just trying to lay the basics for why I'm doing this and why I'm qualified to do this and then eventually why this matters. Why it's not just some trivial point. It's not just what I'm going to talk about is not just an academic exercise for intellectual entertainment. It's actually pertains to the world. It answers questions that people have had literally for thousands of years. For 2,500 years, philosophers have not known how to address certain things. And Meher Baba's teachings, when understood, can address those things, but not misunderstood. Misunderstood, they only just repeat the old. And it has bugged me that he has been misunderstood once I started to see what he was really saying, because I could like slam my finger on a piece of paper and just look what he's saying. Now, if somebody would listen to me, which is rare, I'm not that charismatic, but they could see that I was right. But usually I have to sit there and be quiet while some other person who has no idea what he's talking about gives a talk. And oh well. So that's why I'm doing this sort of on the sly and leaving it for the future when I'm not here, so that if somebody hates it, they go, "That idea sucks." I won't have to endure that, and hopefully they'll appreciate the work I've done. Okay, that's all I've got for this. Um, I'll see you on the other side with part 4, but I'm not going to do that today. All right, bye-bye.